you're watching Daybreak on A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Let's see the headlines. The US has paused its bombing campaign against Iran for the first time in 13 days amid renewed diplomatic efforts. Ukraine and Russia exchanged fresh overnight attacks as fighting intensified on both the battlefield and key infrastructure. Hundreds of thousands have been forced to flee as fast-moving wildfires sweep across southern Europe. First, this morning, a fragile pause has taken hold in the Middle East. Both the United States and Iran have suspended their direct military strikes, halting 2 weeks of nightly bombardments. While Washington points to diplomatic efforts, mounting military costs and casualties are revealing the true toll of the conflict.
For the first time in 13 days, the Pentagon has halted its bombing campaign against Iran. United Nations Ambassador Mike Waltz confirmed the pause is for negotiations, reportedly timed to allow an Omani delegation in Tehran to discuss reopening the Strait of Hormuz, but the decision also reflects severe military constraints. Defense sources say top advisors, including Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane, warned the president that the US is exhausting pre-selected targets and draining critical air defenses across the Middle East. The numbers highlight this strain. The US has already fired more than 1,200 Patriot interceptors, each costing more than $4 million. This comes as the Defense Department updates its casualty statistics, reporting 642 US military casualties, including 18 deaths, since the large-scale operations began on the 28th of February. Tehran has reciprocated the pause, though officials insist their strategy remains attack for attack. Army spokesperson Mohammad Akraminia says the US failed its objectives and Iran remains fully prepared. Backing that claim, an IRGC commander says Iranian forces have already struck nearly 300 US targets regionally, allegedly destroying 11 aircraft at the Jordanian base. However, Tehran views the pause as a tactical delay. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghaei confirmed indirect messages via Qatar and Pakistan, but ruled out formal talks. He accused Washington of a third diplomatic betrayal over a 14-clause agreement, declaring Iran's sovereignty the absolute priority. Beyond Iran, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei says securing Lebanon is a prerequisite to end the wider war. Meanwhile, Israel and Lebanon prepare for US-brokered talks in Italy on August 4th to coordinate Israeli withdrawals.
A Ukrainian drone attack on Russia's Belgorod region injured 12 people, including 2 children, while a separate strike damaged an apartment building in the southern city of Rostov-on-Don, according to local authorities. Meanwhile, Russia said its forces had taken control of the settlement of Shevchenko in Ukraine's Donetsk region. The Russian Defense Ministry also claimed it had struck Ukrainian military facilities, including drone production and storage sites, logistics centers and infrastructure. Ukraine, meanwhile, reported striking a Russian oil and gas facility in Crimea, which it said was used to support Russian forces. The war in Ukraine continues on multiple fronts, with heavy fighting, long-range strikes and sustained pressure on critical infrastructure, highlighting that neither side appears ready to ease its military objectives. Meanwhile, the European Union has approved its 21st sanctions package against Russia, targeting banks, energy revenues and entities linked to Moscow's military-industrial base. While diplomatic contacts between Washington and Moscow continue despite little sign of a breakthrough. Let's bring in our guest now. Brian Pickens, Executive Director at Valerix Group, joins us from Las Vegas, United States. Welcome to the program, Brian.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, the European Union has approved its 21st sanctions package targeting more than 200 individuals and entities, banks and sectors linked to Russia's war economy. Now, what sets this package apart from previous rounds?
You know, I think this package of sanctions is a little bit more aggressive. It's attacking a couple of different industries inside of Russia. But, you know, regardless of what we do with sanctions, the sanctions have to be backed up with combat momentum in the battle space. If we don't maintain momentum, pushing the line with Russia back out of Ukraine, the sanctions really don't do what they're intended to do. You know, Russians have suffered for a really long time with poor economy and other things, and you know, the sanctions really have to be backed by military power, otherwise it doesn't land as big of a effect to bring Russia to the table.
Okay, so as we said, sanctions are in their 5th year. Are they still capable of influencing Russia's strategic decision-making, though? Or has Moscow adapted to operating under these long-term economic restrictions?
They have an effect. I mean, Moscow is obviously capable of working with its partners that are on, you know, the enemy side of the free world in order to, you know, maintain some economic stability. So Iran, you know, China, Cuba, all these nations that are on the other side are supporting Russia in maintaining their fight. So, you know, I think it's really interesting. You know, we've got America fighting Iran. We got Ukraine fighting against Russia. I mean, you could really say that we're already in a World War III. The world is slowly coming into this conflict, and you know, the most dangerous thing would be if China starts to have an effect on Taiwan at this point while we're all actively engaged.
And Brian, military operations continue alongside diplomatic contacts, on the one hand, between senior US and Russian officials. Now, does maintaining dialogue reduce the risk of escalation, even though a settlement isn't likely, a negotiated settlement?
You know, I don't really think the negotiations do much of anything outside of, you know, prolong the inevitable. I mean, the only thing that Russia understands is military might and showing that that they will lose. You know, it's the diplomatic part of it between America and Russia is not going to change whether Ukraine and Russia fight each other.
And having said that, Russia has increasingly relied on its defence industrial base and military might, as you put it, and wartime economy. Which side currently appears better positioned to sustain a long conflict economically at this point?
I mean, Russia, with Ukraine having massive effects on their economy and their oil production and stuff like that, plus the sanctions being a part of it. If that is maintained, that'll absolutely shut down the Russian war machine. However, you know, on the Ukrainian side, they didn't have a big defense industry prior to this conflict. So, you know, as they started to scale drones, the technology of drone warfare out of necessity, because they were not receiving enough equipment to decisively win the war and maintain momentum. You know, Ukraine had revolutionized the drone warfare space. However, that's still with the good graces of the West donating into this conflict and maintaining support with, you know, your conventional munitions and some drone munitions as well. So as Russia is capable industrially of being able to build munitions within its own country and throw more equipment towards the fight, Ukraine is capable of technologically defeating them and being more maneuverable in the battle space, as long as the West continues to aid in a way that maintains momentum, not just gain momentum. We have to be able to ensure that how we are supporting Ukraine is in a way that maintains the momentum gained in the battle space, so that they can continue to push Russia out of the country.
And let's stay on the drones for a minute, Brian. Looking beyond the battlefield, how important has drone warfare become in shaping the strategic balance compared with more conventional military operations? You know,
I mean, you could say that we started the new Cold War, the new arms race, with the drone warfare piece. You know, we no longer are fighting for nukes or trying to have the biggest nuclear weapon or nuclear power in the world. Drones are now telling nations that you can defend against a much bigger military as long as you have a good combined arms drone plan. The drones are really the leveling piece. All of the pieces on the chessboard have changed in how they are employed, and the rules to all the munitions that are on a chessboard. So, drones, two guys in a OP position could be sitting there with a batch of fiber optic drones, and with them being able to reach out 50 kilometers, that means they could shut down vehicle routes for a 100-kilometer bubble or circle. That in and of itself is such a massive change in warfare in general that we're going to be changing doctrine. We're going to have to change strategy and tactics. And what is even more dangerous with this entire piece is the technology changes every month, which means doctrine, tactics, and strategy changes every single month, because if the technology changes and we now have a longer range, we have to change our employment of how we use these pieces and how we maneuver our elements in the battle space. So we're in a point in world history that we've never seen before, where that technology is changing faster than we have ever seen in history in combat with war products.
Okay, and before I let you go, Brian, let's discuss aid. From NATO's perspective, is the objective more and more about ensuring Ukraine can sustain its defense over time rather than expecting a decisive military breakthrough here?
I think the West wants to support Ukraine in having a military breakthrough, because, we had expected this war to be over in one day. Russia was supposed to win. Obviously, that didn't happen, and it's to the betterment of all of Europe that this war stops, and the world can get back to as it was before Russia was inside of Ukraine's borders. But the problem is as Russia is doing saboteur acts inside of Europe, as NATO is becoming more destabilized, as Europe in and of itself is kind of destabilizing the relationships between each other, which is absolutely a Russian propaganda and a Russian mission to destabilize that region so that Europe and America cannot combine arms logistically to support Ukraine in maintaining the momentum in the battle space that I had said prior. I think it's Europe's goal to help Ukraine decisively win the conflict, but I think they're running into struggles with the Russians' saboteur acts and destabilization of the regional relationships.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning. I appreciate your time and analysis.
Thank you.
And now to a short break. When we return, we'll discuss the rest of the global stories. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. Britain's new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, is preparing to welcome Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as his first international visitor since taking office. British-led military training will be the focus when they meet at a UK naval base on Monday. The two leaders will hear how programs are helping strengthen Ukraine's armed forces and delivering results on the battlefield. They will also meet more than 200 Ukrainian military personnel and sailors taking part in Exercise Seabreeze, a maritime security and counter-mine exercise.
Every day think, well, what can we do?
Wildfires are continuing to challenge emergency services across southern Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron has called a crisis meeting, and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has visited areas affected by the flames. Both countries have mobilised additional support as extreme weather conditions make firefighting efforts increasingly difficult.
More than 320,000 people have been evacuated to safety across France and Spain as fast-moving wildfires continue to ravage southern Europe. Extreme heat, strong winds and prolonged drought have fueled the flames. In southwestern France, more than 220,000 people have been forced to flee their homes after the Gironde wildfire scorched around 42,000 hectares and spread to within 15 kilometres of Bordeaux. Authorities say the blaze remains highly unpredictable, with shifting winds and dry conditions making containment efforts increasingly difficult. Around 2,500 firefighters supported by military personnel, helicopters and waterbombing aircraft have been deployed, while the European Union has sent additional aerial resources to assist. French President Emmanuel Macron is due to chair a crisis cabinet meeting on Monday as another heat wave threatens to worsen conditions, with temperatures forecast to reach up to 40 degrees Celsius in parts of the country. Over in Spain, around 100,000 people have evacuated to safety from affected areas, including Madrid, Avila, Valencia and Castellón. Hundreds of firefighters, supported by international crews and aircraft provided through the European Union Civil Protection Mechanism, remain on the front lines as officials warn that the coming days will be critical. The emergency has also spread to Italy, where hundreds of tourists were evacuated from the Gargano Peninsula after flames swept through coastal woodland. Authorities across southern Europe remain on high alert as persistent, hot, dry weather continues to fuel the fires.
Our correspondent William Denslow reports from an evacuation centre in Bordeaux.
It was another difficult night here in the Gironde region. According to officials, a further 50,000 or so people being asked to evacuate their homes. That brings the total now closer to the 250,000 mark since the wildfire started to engulf this region here in southwest France. I'm here in a exhibition centre in Bordeaux, the largest centre of its kind for those that have been displaced because of the fire. It has the capacity to house around 10,000 people, and according to the cities of Bordeaux's mayor, around 5,000 to 6,000 people were here on Saturday. When it comes to the response, French President Emmanuel Macron says that the French people are standing shoulder to shoulder. We're seeing that not just when it comes to volunteers coming to sites like this to help people that have been forced to flee their homes, but also help for first responders, those tackling the blazes on the ground. A plane dumping a fire retardant has been deployed. That was in use on Saturday. We also know that the European Union is providing its assistance as well through helicopters, through planes capable of dropping water on the blazes as well. With difficult conditions, winds swirling, first responders say that this kind of outreach, this kind of support to assist crews on the ground is urgently needed as blazes continue to wreak havoc, both here in the region of Gironde in southwest France, but of course we're also seeing those wildfires forcing tens of thousands of people to be displaced in the region near Madrid, Spain as well. William Denslow, Frey News in Bordeaux, France.
German authorities say the man suspected of carrying out Saturday's deadly attack near Berlin's Pride celebrations has been shot dead by police. Chancellor Friedrich Merz has urged the public not to give in to fear, as security has been stepped up across the country.
German police have shot dead the man suspected of carrying out Saturday's deadly vehicle and knife attack near Berlin's Christopher Street Day celebrations. Authorities identified the suspect as 21-year-old German citizen Abdul Balaut, who they said had been radicalised and was known to police. Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt described the incident as a likely Islamist terrorist attack. Police said the suspect was killed on Sunday in Berlin's Spandau district after charging at officers with a knife. Investigators are not looking for additional suspects, but Germany has raised its threat level over concerns about possible copycat attacks.
I would like to thank the emergency services for their exemplary and swift response, which may well have prevented something worse from happening last night. And I would like to say to the participants of Christopher Street Day here in Berlin, but also across Germany, do not let yourselves be intimidated. These acts have only one purpose. They aim to divide our society. They want to take away the most important things we have, our openness and our freedom.
Einschüchtern.
After his remarks, Merz visited the scene near the Brandenburg Gate, where he laid flowers alongside Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt and other senior government officials in tribute to the victims. The attack, which took place near one of Europe's largest annual LGBTQ pride events, left one person dead and 29 others injured. Organisers have urged the public not to use the attack for political gain, while mourners continue to leave flowers and messages at the site.
Israel has approved the legal framework to allow a multinational security force to enter Gaza under a ceasefire plan proposed by US President Donald Trump. An Israeli official said the Security Cabinet approved the plan ahead of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's meeting with US President Donald Trump in Washington on Tuesday. The International Stabilization Force would include around 200 personnel from countries including Uganda and Morocco, with deployment subject to Israeli approval. No timeline has been announced. As the conflict in the Middle East continues, Pope Leo has delivered a fresh appeal for peace and dialogue. Here's more on his latest message.
Pope Leo on Sunday renewed his appeal for peace in the Holy Land, calling for negotiations towards a wider political solution as violence continued to escalate across the region. Speaking during the Angelus prayer at Castel Gandolfo, the pontiff said the worsening conflict had claimed many civilian lives in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. He urged all sides to resume negotiations, saying any lasting settlement should be founded on equal dignity and equal rights for all people.
I make a heartfelt appeal for a return to negotiations aimed at achieving a just political solution, founded on the equal dignity and equal rights of every human person, and for the rejection of new military actions and unilateral decisions, particularly those that violate the respect and status quo of holy sites of every religious faith.
The Pope also warned that the wider conflict across the Middle East was bringing renewed violence and destruction, placing civilians at increasing risk and worsening shortages of drinking water and electricity. The appeal comes as the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate, with civilians across the region bearing the brunt of the conflict.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will travel to Washington on Monday for talks with President Trump. The two leaders are expected to discuss Iran and other key regional issues. Ahead of the visit, Netanyahu also welcomed what he described as Washington's firm stance against the International Criminal Court, saying US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had reaffirmed America's intention to act against the ICC. Netanyahu said Israeli security operations in the occupied West Bank are also underway.
Tomorrow I will fly to Washington to meet, at his invitation, with President Trump, and afterward to participate in the memorial service for a great friend of Israel, Senator Lindsey Graham. I must say that he was one of Israel's greatest friends since its establishment, and it is fitting that we pay him this honor. I will also speak with President Trump about all the issues currently on the agenda, including the situation in Iran.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he intends to travel to New York for the United Nations General Assembly in September, despite the International Criminal Court arrest warrant. His comments come after New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani called on the US government to arrest him. In a Fox News interview, Netanyahu accused Mamdani of fomenting hate and claimed some Jewish residents were fearful. He also warned Iran that any future attack directly or through proxy groups would bring what he called a very, very forceful Israeli response. However, he says he expects to attend the annual UN gathering unless security conditions change.
Hundreds of aid workers and journalists.
Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has accused the United States of waging what he called a political genocide against Cuba, blaming Washington's sanctions and oil embargo for the island's worsening economic crisis. Speaking during Revolution Day celebrations, Diaz-Canel blamed US sanctions and the oil embargo for deepening Cuba's economic crisis, which has led to fuel shortages, rolling blackouts and widespread hardship. He also dismissed a recent US State Department report accusing Cuba of infiltrating the US government and backing left-wing terrorism, saying the allegations were intended to justify continued pressure on Havana.
The officials at the US State Department, experts in drafting sanctions, making lists, inventing pretexts, are a modern version of the drafters of edicts and military proclamations who were so feared and hated in the dark times of the Middle Ages or during the Nazi occupations in World War II. As if the rest of the world were from their colony, they dictate how things should be done under threats of punishment or aggression. We reaffirm that Cuba is and will be a sovereign country, that no one, under any circumstances, has the right to decide for us, that the economic, political and social decisions are and will be ours.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has announced a major overhaul of the country's examination system following weeks of protests over leaked exam papers. In a video message, Modi said a new task force led by technology entrepreneur Nandan Nilekani would modernise the system and make greater use of technology to improve transparency and restore public trust.
Friends, the government is taking several steps to safeguard the future of our students. Those who tried to ruin the future of the students are now behind bars. We have already established fast-track courts to deal with such cases, and tomorrow in the Parliament we will be moving towards enacting stricter laws. But we have to think of the future. Our examination process should be reliable and trustworthy, transparent, and should be equipped with modern technology. Keeping this in mind, we have decided to constitute a high-powered task force under the leadership of world-renowned technology expert Nandan Nilekani. This task force will focus on the examination reforms, and soon, based on its report, we will take steps to ensure the credibility of examinations in future very soon.
Rising living costs are eroding support for Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. That's according to the latest polls, which show her government's approval rating has fallen to its lowest level since she took office. According to a Yomiuri poll, support for Takaichi's administration dropped from 69% in June to 57% in July, while the disapproval rating rose from 21% to 34%. The survey also found that 71% of respondents believe the government's measures to tackle the rising cost of living are insufficient. Analysts say this is the main reason behind the decline in public support. The 12th typhoon of the year has brought severe weather to southern China, leaving authorities scrambling to respond as the storm moves across the region. More in this report.
Typhoon Nul has battered southern China after making landfall in Guangdong province early on Sunday, unleashing destructive winds and torrential rain across Guangdong and neighbouring Fujian. The storm struck Huidong County near Huizhou City with force 14 winds. Trees, lampposts, billboards and basketball hoops were torn down overnight, leaving debris strewn across roads. Authorities activated the highest level of emergency response on Saturday as the powerful storm approached. Schools, workplaces, businesses and public transport services were suspended. More than 70,000 people were evacuated and over 300 emergency shelters opened. In nearby Huilai County, powerful winds uprooted large trees and blocked major roads. Firefighters and maintenance crews worked to remove the debris and restore access. Nul also swept into neighbouring Fujian province, lashing Jiangzhou with driving rain and wind gusts exceeding 57 kilometers an hour. Hong Kong raised its typhoon warning from signal number 8 to number 9 as conditions deteriorated. Schools were closed and many bus services reduced or suspended, while residents were warned to avoid coastal areas and water sports. Forecasters in neighbouring Macau are also warning of strong winds, heavy rain and thunderstorms as Typhoon Nul moves across the region.
We'll take a quick break now. When we return, we'll take a look at key regional developments. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Let's turn to the region now. The United Nations Secretary General has called for greater international support for Syria during the first visit to the country by a serving UN chief in more than 15 years.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has pledged the UN's support for Syria, urging the international community to help the country rebuild as it enters a new political chapter.
The United Nations stands with the people of Syria at this pivotal moment. And I am carrying the strongest possible appeal to the international community, appeal to spare no effort to support the Syrian people and to support the Syrian government.
Guterres also welcomed recent steps to ease sanctions, but said all remaining restrictions should be lifted to support Syria's economic recovery. The Secretary-General also toured Sednaya prison during the first visit to Syria by a serving UN chief since 2009. The prison became a symbol of abuses under former President Bashar al-Assad, where rights groups documented torture and mass executions during the civil war. The visit comes as Syria's transitional government seeks to rebuild after Assad was ousted in late 2024, ending more than a decade of conflict.
Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara hailed the role that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Saudi Arabia played in lifting US sanctions on Syria last year. However, he says that the process of removing Syria from the US list of state sponsors of terrorism is still underway. Al-Shara says that Syria has assured Washington will not shelter terrorist groups or allow the transfer of weapons or funds. The country has remained on that list since 1979, a designation seen as a major obstacle to its economic recovery. Tehran and Kyiv are fiercely clashing over the reality of a deadly drone strike in the Caspian Sea. Iran is threatening severe retaliation, condemning the incident as an unprovoked attack on a civilian commercial ship that killed one sailor. Iranian officials call it a blatant violation of international law, but Kyiv paints a completely different picture. President Volodymyr Zelensky defended the operation, claiming the targeted vessel was actively transporting military cargo.
We need a practical mechanism that will allow.
And joining us now to discuss further is Shiraz Mahmoud Khan, a research scholar from Western Caspian University. Shiraz, welcome to the program.
My pleasure.
So as we just heard in that story, there does appear to be a spillover. Are we actually witnessing the Russian-Ukraine war spill over into the Caspian?
Well, the spillover, if it ignites, if the war goes up ladder, the spillover is not only in here, because we just see there are three options we have it. One is Caspian Sea, one is Hormuz, and one is Red Sea. So Red Sea is already disturbed by the Houthis, and Hormuz is already disturbed by U.S. and Iranian officials. So for Iranians, Caspian was the most safest passage outside for the corridor, for their trade and all that. But Caspian has been hit as well. That has its own implications. Whether that has good implications or bad implications, what U.S. would like to want is that to control Iran from all the ways for the trading and all that. So if Caspian comes into the situation like that, that would have obviously a very negative implications for the whole region, because obviously China would not want Caspian or Hormuz to be closed like that. And China is like the bigger power in the region after U.S. But after U.S. does not have much of an influence in this part of the region, especially after the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan back 2-3 years back. So it does not have much of an influence, but China has a lot of stakes in the region, and so this would have a lot of implications, not only for the Caucasus region, but beyond that as well.
For sure. And if Ukraine now sees the Caspian as an integral part of Russia's military logistics network, does that mean we're likely to see the future strikes against vessels involved in those supply chains, including those linked to Iran?
Yeah, we can because if Zelensky is linking this cargo as a military equipment carrier, then it can obviously do that in future as well. But that would have very very negative implications on all the parts of the region, especially here in Azerbaijan as well. And because Caspian Sea is connecting to Azerbaijan, and it's other countries as well. So well, it can escalate. It can escalate a lot if we see this kind of a trend in future. Yeah.
And what's most concerning here in this context, especially for us, is the region, is the Caucasus now. So what does this apparent convergence of two separate conflicts, we've got Russia and Ukraine, and then the confrontation involving Iran, the US and Israel in the Caspian region mean for the South Caucasus?
Well, the thing is that if you talk about Russia and Ukraine war, that is expanding. Everybody's hitting everyone every day. This war is expanding as well because this was just dependent on one Strait of Hormuz. Now it has gone to 3 different seas, 3 different waters. So which means it's expanding as well. Russia does not have much of options because Russian northern corridor is closed because of the sanctions and all that. The middle corridor comes into the play, so it has a very good it has a very good effect for Azerbaijan and Caucasus as well. All the countries which are using the middle corridor, that would be three countries of Central Asia, and then Azerbaijan and Turkey and beyond European countries. What U.S. wants right now is U.S. wants to have its own corridor through Nakhchivan, right? So it's going to be Nakhchivan and Azerbaijan and middle corridor, and then that's what, because U.S. does not want to bring in Iran and Russia into the corridor so that it can affect their economies. But Russia and Iran would not even want that. So that is like a competition between all these major regional powers going on, which I can see middle corridor can have a lot of demand because no other corridors is there. Chabahar, a port in Iran, has a problem. This northern corridor for Russia is in a problem. One of the only options which is left is Caspian Sea, which is comparatively safer, and middle corridor. And then if for example EU comes in and do some more contracts with Azerbaijan for their gas and for their energy deliveries and all that, that can obviously bring in a lot of investment, a lot of money to Azerbaijan in a shorter term. But obviously, in a longer term, if this Caspian thing escalates, that has a different negative implications on Azerbaijan and Caucasus as well.
And again, in the region, Tehran outlined a vision to utilize Armenian territory as a transit hub to export Iranian natural gas to broader international and third-party markets. How realistic is that?
Well, that is not at the moment a lot of realistic because, we see EU backing Armenia sometimes as well at the same time. But the thing is that middle corridor has been, the key partner for investment and bringing and transporting the energy and all the resources. Where investment of not only Azerbaijan or Turkey is there, but the investment of Russian investment is there as well, and China's investment is there as well because and Iranian investment is in middle corridor as well. So the thing is that it has always been invested, and it is the only safest route which can take you there. The energy, it's the only safest energy corridor for European markets and all that at this point in time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I want to ask you about TRIP as well. Iranian officials have once again reaffirmed Tehran's long-standing positions on preserving existing regional borders, advancing regional connectivity, and opposing the presence of extra-regional actors in the South Caucasus. So against this backdrop, how likely is it that Iran will seek to influence Armenia's policy choices in ways that could complicate projects such as the Trump route for international peace and prosperity?
Well, Trump route for prosperity, as far as that is concerned, Trump wants to integrate Azerbaijan at this point in time. Okay, so and you know the peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan in presence of Trump means that, you know, Trump recognized that Azerbaijan has gone through a troublesome time, and Azerbaijan is the one who took its territories back and won its territories back and all that, and recognize all these things. So it would be, you know, it would go in favor of U.S. to have good terms with Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan is not a very isolated country. Azerbaijan has very good connections with the Western countries, with EU, with Turkey, with Central Asian countries, and beyond in South Asia, Pakistan, and beyond as well. So Azerbaijan is a very important regional player, where Armenia is not that influential and all that. So obviously that would not really materialize in my analysis and all that.
Okay, Shiraz, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning. It's always a pleasure having you and listening to your analysis.
My pleasure.
Now we'll take a short break. Stay with us for more updates. Now, Instagram has introduced a new feature that lets users replace the audio in existing posts without affecting the post's engagement. Here's that story and more with A News' Nathan Kamanga on Switch.
Let's talk music. We all kind of like it. But just like with food, our taste seems to change over time. You could like a track today, post something with it, and then after hearing the same song over 1 billion times, you hate it. Well, what happens then? Do you delete your old posts? Well, that's where Instagram's new Replace Audio 2 comes in. And here on Switch, we decided to give it a try. To access the feature, you'd have to go over to your desired post, tap on the menu in the top right corner, go down to the edit option, and voila! You've now brought new life to your old posts. The feature makes the changes without resetting your like count, so you don't have to worry about asking your grandma to like your post again. I'm sure we've all heard about the threat of AI taking over our jobs, but it's not often that we hear of AI losing its job to us. Well, at least that's what's been happening at Ford after it revealed that it's been hiring back some human engineers after the AI that replaced them failed to match their skills and experience. The US automaker bought into all the hype around how AI can boost productivity and cut costs, and they chose to deploy it across their entire industrial system. And of course, they laid off engineers who they didn't think they needed anymore. It wasn't long before Ford noticed their own mistake after the AI they so heavily relied on just didn't measure up. So they called back their human engineers to retrain the models that replaced them. My only question is, what happens when the AI models get better? More layoffs? Now, still on the subject of losing jobs to AI, apparently dogs are now at risk. A smart robotic guide dog has been put into field trials in China, where it could serve visually impaired people. The robo-dog is equipped with multimodal sensors and large AI models that give it the ability to identify objects like steps and vehicles. It could even autonomously plan routes. Can your dog do that? The robotic alternative is seeking to fill the gap of lengthy training and high costs that traditional guide dogs require, serving both as an outdoor navigation aid and an in-home companion. Well, who would have thought that man would be getting a new best friend? Well, that's all for now. Be sure to catch up with us for more tech news and insights on the next show.
That's all from us on Daybreak this morning. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.